Welcome to M-powerTV, where we leave a legacy of hope through conversations that uplift, educate, and inspire. Listen to incredible stories of people who overcame challenges and barriers. Celebrate victories, learn from setbacks, and push forward together. Want to be empowered? Let's go.
Hello and welcome to Women Power. I'm your host Lorna Grayling, and in studio today we have one incredible woman, Sandra Hogue. She is a foster mom of 10 children and she's joined us today to share her journey. Sandra, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm so honored to have you. 10 foster kids. My goodness, wow, that is incredible because I have 3 teenagers. I don't know how you do it. I constantly believe that I should have some kind of medal, right? I envision myself at the school walking up on stage, you know, palm leaves, you know what I'm saying, that huge trophy waiting for me, and that's 3. I only have 3. All right, so I'm sure the question everybody wants to know is, how do you do it? How do you mother 10 children?
Well, it's by the grace of God. It's a calling, and it's not something that we take lightly. We find it's a privilege for us that God would have chosen us, and we're not perfect at it by any means, but we have just answered the call and said yes to God. And when we said yes, all those many years ago, the kids started coming, and we had no idea that we would end up with 10.
My goodness. So do you have some of your own children as well, or is it all foster?
None are biological. No.
Yeah.
No.
That
We
is-
actually fostered 18 children, and 10 of them were reunified with their families,
That's
which is the goal of foster care. And then the 8 of them were adopted by us through foster care, and then we adopted 2 extras from private agencies, giving us 10.
That is incredible. So what do you have in your home that is kind of established that our viewers can draw from, that I want to say that gives you the ability to have so many different personalities in your home? Because I think not only, you know, I know if I think about myself, I have a certain personality type, my husband has a certain personality type, and then I have 3 girls that are all different.
Yeah.
And so it's quite hard to sometimes work with all the different personality types. So you have that, and then you also have kids that come from traumatic circumstances. That creates a whole different structure. So what practical things do you guys implement to work around that?
That's a good question. I think one of the greatest needs of the children that come into foster care is the nurturing and consistency. Consistency because so much of their world has been turned upside down. Some of them didn't know where their next meal was coming, or when mom or dad were coming home, or you know, bedtimes were always sporadic. Things were just inconsistent, and giving them that is first and foremost important, but I think equally important is the nurture. It's trying to connect with their hearts and making sure they understand how precious they are and how special they are, and that the reason they're in foster care has nothing to do with them. Because I didn't realize that until we went into it, that sometimes the kids feel at fault for why their parents are no longer able to parent them. And so I would say those would be the 2 mainstays, the consistency and the nurturing.
I love that because it's something that we can all kind of make sure that we implement that. Is consistency, that regular, you know, going to bed at a certain time, having your meals. I never actually even thought about how important those things are. We
Yeah.
kind of just do it, you know, we do what we do, and
Yeah.
you never even realize that.
Yeah, and they let you know. Because if you have meal times and a couple minutes has passed, they'll let you know. You said snack was at 10 a.m. And
Wow.
so they get used to that consistency. They look to that as part of their regular routine, and it's helpful for them.
And it gives them peace and safe, makes them feel safe.
It does. It does. It creates felt safety. And that's another really important thing with foster kids, because some of them have come from abuse. And then others have come from neglect, where they've just been left and not cared for, not nurtured, not fed. But the ones that have been abused, that peace and that routine is super important for them, to give them a sense of stability.
Yeah. And then do they also go for a certain amount of therapy and counseling as well? Is that quite important in the house?
It depends on the age of the child and what type of abuse they've endured. But yes, counseling is definitely a part of their healing process.
Yeah, I'm sure. I sometimes just as an average mother feel like I might need counseling. Just from, general raising kids. It's just so hard these days.
It is.
The times we live in, the uncertainty outside. What do you do for self-care? Do you have time for self-care?
I think everyone sees self-care differently. Some people have self-care in their mind as going to get a massage or getting a pedicure, or something that they can go do for themselves, shopping, retail therapy. Those things are fine, and I have nothing against that for people who decide to do that, but those are just very temporal. For me, self-care is spending time in worship and spending time in the Word, because that's what feeds me and lasts, and that's what I need to be the best mom I can be, to be patient, to walk in the fruit of the Spirit and love and joy and peace and patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, and self-control. If I didn't have that time with the Lord, I would be a mess, and I wouldn't be helping to nurture and provide healing, a healing place for my kids. It would just be chaos.
I love
so
that.
I have that is my self-care. And if I neglect that, it shows. Because it's a lot, like you said.
Yeah.
The uncertainty outside, the culture that's always fighting against. And you mentioned you had teenagers, and this is a hard time to live as a teenager.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's hard for them, it's hard for us.
Yeah. I so appreciate what you're mentioning now about time with the Lord and just, connecting and getting filled from inside.
Yes.
Because even just for any mother out there, if we don't do that, I can't see how can we mother our kids if we are not filled.
Absolutely.
That is really something that I only learned throughout my parenting. As my relationship with God grew, the better I could become at being a mom. I could forgive myself a lot easier if I make mistakes. I wouldn't, kind of beat myself over the head so much, because the more you do that, the more you fail at just general things. Well, that's what I found. So,
Yeah,
that is so powerful.
I agree.
I know that 90% of children that are homeless are from fatherless homes, right? So, you and your husband, Stephen, you've been together for how many years?
24 years.
24 years?
In just a couple of weeks, we'll be celebrating our 25th.
Congratulations.
anniversary. Thank you.
So what is your secret to your happy marriage? Because obviously that is so important to have that unity and that stability as well.
Absolutely.
Especially in this environment that you find yourself in.
One of the things I'm kind of chuckling over here is that the kids do when they first come into your home is they try to triangulate, which is a psychological term where they put mom against dad or vice versa. And we learned that early on we had to have a unified front. That means that we just had to agree on certain things, that sometimes we had to separate ourselves from a situation where we didn't know how to handle it and speak privately and come up with a unified answer so that the kids didn't see arguing or disagreeing, but that we would confront the situation with a common answer, with mom and dad saying this is how it's going to be. Because as parents, sometimes we get questioned about things or new situations arise and we're like, oh my goodness, what do we say to this, or how do we respond? And so I think having a unified front is super important, but even more important is also his relationship with the Lord. And if he didn't have that relationship and I didn't have that relationship, we would be at odds. We would be against each other, and we wouldn't be unified even in the way that we view things with our children and things in our home. So we value certain things because of our relationship being rooted in Christ and in the Bible.
Absolutely, that's amazing. I like what you're saying about having that front, you know, that you are unified, and then to sort out things behind the scenes, because so often in parenting we kind of get caught up in that emotion, right? Because let's be honest, I mean, you explain it very beautifully, but
there were times that we really thought he was dead, because he would be screaming and you would hear all this torture, and then they would shoot.
I said to Lorna, you couldn't feel Jesus. It felt like he left you. You're sort of on your own.
because let's be honest, I mean, you explain it very beautifully, but I am very like outspoken and loud sometimes, and when we have a disagreement, it takes everything inside of me to bite on my tongue, keep quiet, right? And then to try and sort it out somewhere else, because that is very, very hard. And I think it's harder for some than for others, I'm not sure. So do you have an agreement beforehand that kind of says, right, this is the rules in our marriage? If we have a disagreement, if we are not on the same page, we're gonna calm down, we're gonna take 5 minutes, I don't know, walk around the house, and, you know, I don't know, until we can find that time to work through it, because that is a very difficult thing sometimes, is that you want to sort it out, but there's not always that time to do it, especially in a house full of kids.
Right.
Like, where do you find the space and the time?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think my answer would have been different earlier in our parenting and marriage, because I think I was more vocal about how I felt about something, and I wanted to make my opinion heard. Whereas lately, in the last, I don't know, 4 to 5 years, I would say that if we didn't come to an agreement together, that I would just let my husband lead. My trust in his leadership, because he's connected to the Lord, and I trust his relationship with the Lord, that if I'm not sure, or if I'm kind of wishy-washy about it, and if I feel like it can go either way with a decision, I will let him handle it. But to get away sometimes is hard. And you know, sometimes we'll tell the kids, you guys stay right here, and we'll just kind of sneak into a room nearby, and we'll just kind of whisper.
Okay.
Whisper, you know, what do you think we should
That's
say
very
to this?
clever, right? Just to keep your voices down, because that
right.
already decreases the emotion.
Yes,
right.
Yeah. Exactly. So then we're just discussing.
Yeah.
And it's not a heated argument, it's a discussion, and then we come up with an agreement on how to respond. And sometimes it's little things like, you know, a child didn't do their chores and they want to go to a movie, and the movie starts in 30 minutes, and, you know, how should we respond when they're a teenager and they're already older? Should we give them the responsibility of doing it later and let them have the fun, or should we, you know, should we put our foot down? And so sometimes it's little things like that.
Absolutely. It's usually in the little things.
It really is.
It really
it's
is.
a lot of little things.
It's a lot of little things.
Especially when you have 10. And it's a lot of little things.
I can't
It's
imagine.
multiple times during the day.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just have to be honest with your kids and say, you know what, I don't know the answer to that right now, but mom and dad will talk about it and we'll let you know.
Yeah.
And it's okay to be honest and not let them think that we just have the answers to everything.
Yes.
Because we're not perfect, and some of us are sometimes we're just dealing with situations for the first time, and we don't really know how to respond.
Absolutely.
And so it's okay to say, I'm not sure. Let me get with dad, and I'll get right back to you. And then I'll try to, you know, get with dad, and, you know, we have a text together that's just ongoing, and sometimes it's like, hey, what do you think about this? If we're not in the same room, you know.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. It's always the communication, right?
Yes.
My daughter always says that communication is the key to success.
It is.
I really believe that.
It really
I
is.
value what you're saying about, you know, to have your opinion heard, or to be right. Sometimes we value being right, and to have our opinion heard so much that it sometimes trumps the relationship, because sometimes we can decide to just relax and not have our opinion heard and value the relationship sometimes more than,
Right.
That's also something I had to learn.
Yes.
I have to say, in the beginning of my marriage, I was very excited about having my opinion heard and about, but if I think I'm right, we've got to agree on the fact that I'm right. And I've learned over time just to allow circumstances to just, it's okay. God is my vindicator.
Right.
And just like you say, honor your husband.
Right.
What can mothers out there do to really value their husbands and to work on their marriages? Because I did some marriage counseling years ago, and the one thing women always used to tell me is, things are so, chaotic in our house. It would be better for my children if we just got a divorce. All right. So that was a lot of the time the answers. But in many circumstances, like we see now, 90% of kids come from fatherless homes that are homeless, right? 90% of kids that are homeless. So it's not always the answer, right? Divorce. It seems like an easy answer at the time, but it's not always. What can mothers do to appreciate the importance of a marriage, do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, fatherlessness is a real epidemic. It's become such a big issue, not just in the world, but in the church. And I feel like the enemy's after marriages because if he can break a marriage, he can break the family and all the issues that come from fatherlessness, not just homelessness, but even substance abuse issues and identity issues. So many issues stem from the lack of a father to coach us, to mentor us, to affirm us. And so in order to maintain a strong marriage, that's a really big question. And it really just takes both people saying, our relationship to one another and to God are first and foremost, and whatever it takes to pour into that and to invest in that. Whatever it takes, it could be counseling, it could be being a part of a marriage group, it could be submitting to a mentor at your church or to your pastor or to another couple that you look up to just have them hold you accountable. So many different ways that are different for different people. But one thing not to do is to just stay isolated and to keep quiet, because that's what the enemy does. He isolates us and keeps us feeling shame about it. Like, oh no, our marriage is bad, and we go to church. We both are professing Christians. What are people gonna think? And then that just causes this breakdown, and it just gets worse. And then that divorce, and then all of a sudden everybody's shocked. It happens so much where people are like, whoa, what happened? We didn't even know. And so there's an investment involved, and there's accountability involved, and trust that other people have some of your best interest in mind, that you don't have to be isolated and in shame about issues that you might be facing.
Absolutely.
But one thing that I feel like has kept us, my husband and I, strong in our marriage is our personal relationship with the Lord. Just bottom line. If he didn't have his time with the Lord, and he wasn't in his word, and he wasn't honoring me like the word says, and I wasn't doing the same, and I wasn't submitting to the authority that God gave us in our marriage, it would be chaos on top of chaos, because it's already chaotic, like you mentioned, bringing 10 children into your home with all of the abuse and neglect backgrounds and the histories that they come with, and trying to deal with all of those and how those affect their behaviors and how it affects their mindsets. That's a lot in itself. If we weren't unified, and if we weren't fully satisfied in our relationship with Jesus, we really couldn't have made it this far. We really couldn't have. It is really because of him. He is our foundation. And so I would say that first and foremost. But when we have issues, then it's good to look outside and ask for help.
And to sort them out as they come, right? Not to allow them to become many, because then it always seems bigger than it might be. Sometimes it's a lot of small things I've found in my life. It's actually a lot of small things, but it feels so big. It feels like so many.
Yeah.
So if we can start sorting out one by one, And
I
then
agree.
that personal relationship, absolutely, absolutely. You have been so incredible. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a blessing.
Sandra, how can people support you guys? Because you have not only 10 kids that you're taking care of, you know, as they come in and they leave again, and sometimes they're at home, sometimes they have to go to university or whatever the case is, wherever their life takes them. I'm sure it costs a lot of money. How can people support you, and where do they go to do that?
Well, we started a nonprofit. It's called One Family, and they can find it at onefamilyfl, as in Florida.com. And there's a giving page there that they can donate to the nonprofit.
Okay. And in your area, is there any other help that you guys need apart from money, or what other help can people give if they don't have money? Prayers, I'm sure, that is always
Prayers
necessary.
are number one.
Yeah.
But I would say one of the greatest needs that we have right now is that we would find a building locally. We're looking for a place to house our offices, to house a counseling center, a prayer room, and a resource room, and things like that. So that's probably our biggest need.
Okay.
So we're actively looking for that in the Volusia County area.
Volusia County, fantastic. Well, that is it from us. Thank you very much for joining us today. You have been one phenomenal guest, and your advice is so, so special.
Thank you.
That is it from me, Lorna Grayling, Woman Power. If you want to support Sandra and her family, please follow the link on screen. Until next week, goodbye.